All right, time to find out if I've made a huge mistake or not. This is pretty much, I have driven this thing a little bit. Let's see if we can adjust that bad boy. There we go. I drove it a little bit. I actually made a video, but it was so incredibly dark. By the time I got moving and with the tints on this thing, that it was really unusable. So this is the first time I've driven it in a couple days. This is my first commute into the office.
Take the next left onto Samoset Street.
Thank you. In an ICE vehicle in quite a while, and in this thing ever. So this car,
continue on Samoset Street for 3/4 of a mile.
Thank you. Let's please mute you. Okay, very good. So this thing is actually going to be my commuter as my Rivian was, but it's also going to be my long distance car, hence switching to the ICE vehicle because for me, electric cars, there's just something I have to accept. Electric cars just don't work as long distance cars for me. I just don't have the mentality to stop every 200 miles and sit around for an hour while my car charges. So mute that. So let's see how this goes. So now that it's daytime, obviously it's a little bit different, but major difference in this thing is it is much darker in here and the windshield is much smaller. That's a Wrangler thing. We all know about that. But since the roof is solid, now it comes off obviously, but since the roof is solid, it's much darker in here. Don't know if I care right now, but it is a little annoying at night. Like it's oddly dark inside of this thing. And the tints don't help that fact. So, but I do enjoy the tints during the daytime, so I'm probably gonna leave them on, assuming they're legal. I don't know if they are in Massachusetts. We'll find out eventually when I get it inspected. Yeah, this is right out of the gate. It's such a different experience having to switch from gas to brake to gas to brake. It's it's so stupid. You know, I've been doing that I'm 41 years old. I've been doing that since I was 16. But you get used to driving an electric car, and it's particularly the Rivian. The regen braking on the Rivian is so strong that you almost never have to touch the brake unless you're in some sort of emergency situation. I mean, it's really strong. So yeah, that's going to take some getting used to. Now, with that said, on the flip side is you can coast. You know, I can just let off the gas pedal, which is nice, and in a lot of situations more efficient than having regen braking in a weird way. I won't totally geek out on why that is, but it is. All right, so taking the diesel up on the highway, loads and loads of power. I mean, all you ever have to do with this thing is like quarter throttle it, and it just torques its way right on up, keeps up with traffic, gets ahead of traffic, no problem. One thing I'm noticing is I'm going now 65 according to my speedometer. I wonder curious to see if the speed, it did come with a speed calibration thing because it's on 35s. I assume that they had used it. I don't know that they used it. I assume that they used it. And it's actually pretty reasonably quiet in here compared to the JL that I had last. All right, so I'm going to turn on adaptive cruise control, so I'll be commenting on that as time goes along. So I set my adaptive cruise at speed limit. So yeah, it's oddly quiet in here actually. I don't feel as though I need to yell anywhere near as much as I had to in my JL. The cab is much smaller in the JT. I think that probably helps a bunch with that sound just sort of echoing. There's a whole sort of missing section where sound could sort of reverberate in the back there. And on my JL, I actually had like Hotheads headliners installed. This has the factory Mopar headliners installed, which I'm sure helps a little bit. But yeah, this actually feels much quieter than that did. So far, honestly, I expected my ride to be worse than it is. Now this thing, it does absolutely, so one of my big complaints in the suspension with the Rivian was the way it handles sort of quick hit type of bumps. This thing handles them equally bad, if not worse. But I expected it to handle it much, much worse because, again, this is a solid axle coiled vehicle. This one happens to be lifted, which, ironically enough, most times usually lifts ruin Jeeps. But with the new Jeeps, usually lifts help the ride quite a bit, particularly if you go with some really good shocks. This still has the Fox 2.0 shocks on it. And they don't even have shock extenders, and it's lifted 2 inches. So I don't know how much life is left in those. It's got 20,000 miles on it, and I've gone through shocks pretty quickly on one of these things because there's so much roly-poly back and forth. Those shocks really get exercised a lot. But so far the ride has been, other than that, I'm cruising along on the highway at 70 miles an hour. It doesn't float around anywhere near as badly as my old JT did because that was the 3.6 with the aluminum steering box. This one is the diesel, so it absolutely has the steel steering box. And the steering is super, super tight on it, which is really nice. And I don't know who did the lift. Allegedly the dealer did not do it, but it is an AEV lift, which I know gets installed by a lot of dealers. So I'm hoping that the dealer did it, and it seems to be installed right because I'm not feeling any wobbles or nonsense going on here. All right, so I'm kind of doing this test now to compare what my commute is like because that's the vast majority of what this thing is going to get used for. And so far, obviously I've got to steer, which honestly I don't really mind all that much. Using auto steer is nice in sort of mundane traveling conditions, but it also can lead to boredom. So I kind of like having something to do, the steering. I've got my adaptive cruise set. I'm following the car in front of me fine. The adaptive cruise on Jeeps is really, really, really aggressive, at least sort of this generation. Let's say you're following somebody who's going 70, and they move over, and you've got your cruise set to 80. The Jeep will absolutely fucking floor it to get up to 80. Like, it's obnoxious. The one way I found to sort of negate that is to bump the shifter over into manual mode and force it up into 8th gear. Now, you can't do that with the 3.6 because that thing doesn't stand a chance, but you can do it with the diesel because there's so much torque. This thing can go from anywhere north of 55 miles an hour in 8th gear. It's pretty great. Getting an indicated 23 miles per gallon right now. Again, lifted on 35s with the diesel. I saw my 3.6 get 12 at a certain point. Some people are saying they're getting 20 out of it. I think that they go very, very slowly in order to do that. I'm not. I'm going 78 miles an hour, and I'm actually going a little slow for Route 3. There's a couple people riding my ass, but I've decided I'm just going to sit around here. Steering is much, much lighter on this thing than it was on the Rivian. In fact, the whole sort of interaction with the car is easier than it was on the Rivian. I had a really odd complaint about the Rivian about the gas pedal or the throttle pedal, whatever you want to call it, being too springy. There was too much resistance on it. I don't know why they did it. It could result in really bad whiskey wrist. Particularly if you're trying to use that for going off-road, you want it to be as light as possible. That was a really, really stupid minor complaint. I know. I understand that about myself. I do that. But also the steering was really, really heavy on that thing. And the steering is super, super light on this, which is really, really nice. In fact, I found that even though this is a big lifted JL on 35s, I tend to drive it a little bit more exuberantly than I did the Rivian. because it's got the power. It's got loads of power with the diesel, and I intend on getting the Banks throttle monster or power monster or whatever. What a moron. This guy's going like 100 miles an hour. I don't get people that going 100 miles an hour up Route 3 to Boston saves you about 2.5 minutes and puts you at risk of getting pulled over and basically locked up. It's so stupid. Anyway, sorry. But yeah, the interaction with the car is much, much lighter, and it makes me drive. I feel like I'm also much more further forward than I was in the Rivian. The hood is much shorter, it seems anyway. It might be all in my head, I don't know. There wasn't really a particularly long bumper on the Rivian, whereas there is a big steel bumper on this. So maybe it's just sort of what I'm seeing. But I feel like I'm further forward, which makes it feel a little bit more sprightly. The front axle is definitely further forward than it is on the Rivian, which also makes it feel a little bit more lively and fun to throw around. I was actually on the dark video that I will not be bothering to post. I was kicking the rear end around through Miles Standish State Park because there was so much snow, and I was having a lot of fun driving it, actually. So happy with that. Seats, I will say, I actually, when I had my JT and JL before, I really, really liked the seats. I think they're going to take some getting used to again. The Rivian seats, side by side, they felt better, unfortunately. And they had a tilt back function, which I really missed. Now, there's a trick for these. I don't know if you can do it on the JT and JL. You probably can. You just drill a hole in a hockey puck, get some longer bolts, and tilt it back. I did that on all my TJs. But I do remember being totally comfortable in the seats for very long distances on my old JT or JL. So maybe I'll get used to them again. I just got to sort of find the right spots. And they're not power, obviously. I don't really care about that, honestly. It's fine with me. Bolstering is... A lot of people complain that the bolsters are bad on this, but like, I don't want heavy bolsters on these things. Like, I'm not cornering it hard. It's a truck. It's a pickup truck. I'm not really driving it particularly aggressively. So I kind of like having a little bit of room. Like, I'm 6'2", 200 pounds. I'm a little bit of a bigger dude. I'd much rather have the room than be squeezed to death by sporty bolsters. Like, I just think that they're kind of silly. They weren't sporty on the Rivian either. They held you a little bit better than they do on this, but I wouldn't call them sporty by any means. One thing I love about these is the nice tall dash. Obviously, what that results in is a very small windshield, which is particularly prone to cracking on these. In fact, I might even... Do I have one? I might have one. Yeah, if you get a crack in your windshield, don't even bother replacing it until inspection time. Replace it and then wait another year. It's really, really annoying. These things, I think that there should be a class action lawsuit, honestly, against Jeep for the windshields on these because they're so bad. But I love the nice high dash. It's higher than it was on the Rivian. I could still very, very clearly see what I'm driving over just as well as I could on the Rivian for off-roading. I don't know why I put that in quotes, but for off-roading, I can totally see what I'm driving over without any problems. You don't need a low dashboard to do that. There's still a hood in front of you. Having a low dashboard really does nothing to help that. So the dash is nice and high on this, which results in the steering wheel being capable of being nice and high. I put it in sort of like a mid sort of section. But the result of all of that is I've got loads of room for my leg here. I generally sit, like I said, closer than most people my height would. And I've still got loads and loads of room for my leg to move around, which is really nice. I hate when I have to rest my leg on something. It ruins the long distance driving experience. So I'm hitting ACC now. I've got it set to what I've got it set to, but the congestion is building up a little bit. And it's actually yeah, it's kind of funny to feel ACC brake instead of regen brake. Yeah, okay, so I don't know if you can hear that, but you can, as soon as the Jeeps need to accelerate, they accelerate, they put in a decent amount of throttle input to accelerate, which makes the transmission kick down, which makes everything louder. I wish that they had calibrated it so it would put in just enough throttle that the transmission wouldn't kick down. That would have made a huge difference in the adaptive cruise control experience with this thing. But I wonder if the two teams even talked, honestly, because this adaptive cruise control system applies to all sorts of different configurations. But so far, it hasn't been bad. It's let's see, I've got the gap set at 2, and on the Rivian, the gap at 1 was greater than it is right now at 2 on the Jeep. It was actually really bad, the gap. It was so bad that if you use adaptive cruise control a lot, you'll know the experience of adaptive cruise control leaving a gap just big enough for somebody to come running up, cut you off, and then make your adaptive cruise control slam on the brakes. The Rivian did that a lot. And again, I think that they have a good reason for having it calibrated that way, and I hope that over time they will adjust it, because it's way too safe. In that, I think that the reason they did that is because they're worried about lawsuits. So they gave it a huge buffer, while I'm sure it could deal with a much smaller window. So anyway, yeah, so the Jeep is closing that gap much better, which is really nice. And so far, it hasn't totally annoyed me with its slamming on the gas and slamming on the brake, which is nice. It's been smoother than I remember it being. Again, the diesel, I think, smoothens that out, because there's a little bit of lag with the diesels, and all diesels are generally sort of lazy until you get some sort of tune in them to really liven them up. So honestly, I mean, so far on my commute here, I'm really not, I'm not particularly bothered. I really like the level of the armrest and the level of the armrest over here on the door. I think that they're exactly the same, which is really nice. It almost feels like this one might be a little bit taller, but they're pretty damn close, which is really nice. And I think they're a little taller than they were on the Rivian, relative to where I sit. So it's perfect for me. That spot fits like a glove. I can rest my hand on the steering wheel nice and easily, and I can very comfortably rest my hand over here, pop it on the shifter, and do all sorts of insane tapping on things, as I'm known to do. Yeah, so honestly, so far so good. I'll report back when I get stuck in some traffic. But honestly, so far I'm pretty pleased. I'm getting, it's saying my average miles per gallon is 20. I've got an 80-mile round trip commute. With the price of diesel right now, that makes for a pretty outrageous cost. But it's kind of a long story. I guess I'll get into it. Why not? So with the Rivian, I was paying $40 a day to park because I wanted to charge at work. So I was paying $40 a day to park, and then I was getting $10 worth of electricity based on the price of electricity at my house. And that would basically cover the round trip commute. So it cost me $10 more or less to do my 80-mile round trip commute. In this, with the current price of diesel, it's probably going to cost me about $20 for the round trip commute, which seems crazy to me. But diesel is so expensive right now; it's over $5 per gallon. That is the reality of it. Now, when it gets back down to $3.50, $3, whatever, it'll go back down to around $12, where electricity is only going to really go up. It's not going to go down. That's the only direction it's ever gone, is up. So at a certain point, I think that the sort of price comparison will be pretty close. This will still be more expensive, and I acknowledge that. I'm willing to pay for that, for the ability to just pull over, put in some diesel, and continue on with my trip. But for now, the trip is very expensive. Now, asterisk on that, instead of paying $40 to park, now I'm going to go to the parking lot that doesn't have an electric charger that's $25 and a little bit further away from my office. I've got a little scooter in the bed that I use to scoot back over to my office. So that saves me $15 right there. So cost-wise, again, I'm going to be paying a little bit more for this, but not a ton more. I'm going to end up paying about $5 more per commute than I was in the Rivian. Not too bad. Anyway, so yeah, not too bad, particularly for like a big lifted Jeep. I can't really complain about that. And diesel, I don't know if the seasons affect the price of diesel. I don't think so. I think it's just the amount of diesel that there is to go around in crude oil. But diesel tends to be much more efficient in summer as well. The winter mixes kill the efficiency a little bit. So I think I'll be able to get better efficiency than I'm getting in this. I might overall. So this commute is slowing way down. I'm actually kind of surprised it's slowing down here, but welcome to Boston. But I think my efficiency will be better. I think on this trip I might end up doing something like 22, 23. So it's not $20, it's whatever. But I mean, we're really splitting hairs at this point. No matter what, the Rivian was cheaper to run, particularly with maintenance and things like that. So God only knows what oil changes on this thing run. All diesels have like massive oil capacities. So so there's a great example of a spot where the suspension on this is not as compliant as it was on the Rivian. I knew that. I knew it. It's a solid axled, coiled vehicle. Coils aren't the problem. It's really the solid axles, and the radius arms or long, whatever you want to call them on these things. They're a little too stubby, I think. In the back, they're really nice and long, but in front, they're still a little too short, I think. But that's neither here nor there. I'm actually also running the tires a little bit higher PSI than suggested to try and sort of prove the handling a little bit. I'm running them at 41 instead of 37 or whatever. But yeah, anyway, the quick hits are not going to be as compliant in this thing as they were in the Rivian, and in the Rivian, they were bad. So that's something you have to accept about driving a JL or a JT. It is what it is. All right, so anyway, I'm going to check back in once I hit the traffic. You can try and gauge how angry I am and whether or not I made a huge mistake. Once I'm in traffic dealing with this thing, we'll see how it goes. All right. Good news. I found the traffic. It seems to be really bad this morning, too. All right, so I'm on adaptive cruise control right now, coming to a stop now. Oop, inched forward and beep. Makes me take over. God, hopefully I don't hate this. Usually it's not so stop and go. I will say it will let me hit resume as soon as the car in front of me moves, versus the manual, which wouldn't let me hit resume until I hit 20 miles an hour, which was really annoying. But it does hold it for a second. I mean, so if you're kind of stop and going, you'll be all right. It's where you stop for, I think I don't know what it is, if it's like 5 seconds or what, but there is some sort of time limit on it. But so I've only come to a stop once so far. Didn't really mind having to steer this morning. Didn't bother me. As long as I've got adaptive cruise control, I'm happy. I totally wish that I didn't, that the roads weren't congested enough that I liked using adaptive cruise control so much. But the fact of the matter is that the roads are so congested and traffic just constantly changes speed. A lot of times these days, I swear that they don't educate drivers the way that they used to in what lane is supposed to be what. Because I see people all the time these days sitting in the left lane going 65 miles an hour. And it drives me absolutely insane. So adaptive cruise control is really, really good at sort of dealing with that kind of thing. And it's also really good at dealing with this. Honestly, This has been very calm so far. It hasn't slammed on the brakes. It hasn't accelerated super hard. Again, because of the diesel and the throttle response of a diesel, it's like I said, they're always a little lazy. So far, so good. So, other stuff I wanted to talk about. 8.4 inch display on this thing versus like the fucking 90 inch on the Rivian. I don't know what it is. It's enormous. I don't miss the huge display at all. In fact, one thing I love about this is that it's got a screen off button. Though it's an LCD, so there's still a little bit of a sort of glare from it. It's going to kick off. So usually what I do when it turns off to hold it is I'll put on the e-brake. Anyway, so 8.4 inch display up here. And I've got up Google Maps and Waze and blah, you name it. Which is just really, I get it. These are really a supplement for bad in-car navigations to some degree, but I don't know that, I do know actually. At no point will every car, unless they all go with Android Automotive or some sort of Apple platform, will they be able to do iTunes, SiriusXM, Spotify, Audible, YouTube Music, Plex, all that shit. Like, you're just never going to get all that stuff up here unless you have some sort of Android Auto or CarPlay system or an operating system up there that just has the ability to download those apps natively. Yeah, so anyway, I'm really enjoying having that up there again. The navigation on the Rivian was like, it was too aggressive trying to navigate around traffic, which I talked about. But, and I didn't mind that all that much because most of the time I know where I'm going anyway. But the thing that I wish I had up there was Waze for police. I know I'm sort of incriminating myself by saying that. I just like to know where the safest places on the highway are, okay? I don't speed. I just like to know where I will be protected the best on the highway. And with Android Auto and Waze, I can do that. And in fact, with this thing, not that phone. Where's my other phone? I got one of those little wireless dongles. So this is the phone that's driving Android Auto right now. And I just stick it in a little pocket over there, and I'm good. All right, so here I've caught up a little bit more speed this time. Let's see if it sort of like aggressively slams on the brakes for this stop up here. No, pretty smooth, honestly. I will say in traffic, the Rivian was really, really smooth. I really liked it, even though it left that big gap in front. It was very, very smooth in traffic. Yeah, this commute is going to be very stoppy-goey, huh? Geez, Thursday. Golly, 22-minute backup. I am 8 miles from my office. God, this city, I don't get it, man. Boston needs to put in a congestion charge to make people take the train. They just have to. And I'm saying this as somebody who drives in from outside of Boston. Like, they just have to force people to take the train. It's absurd. The traffic in Boston is now the second worst in the nation, fourth worst in the world. I forget what was first in the nation. I'd be pretty goddamn shocked if anywhere is worse than this. Boston tends to be a minimum, if you're coming from the South Shore, it's a minimum of 8 miles of stop and go traffic. 8 miles is a very long time in stop and go traffic. It's much, I see a lot of people. There's a guy driving an old 4Runner, a guy driving an old GLE, old Ford Fusion. All of these people are gas, brake, gas, brake, gas, brake for 8 miles and what will be probably 45 minutes. I don't know how you mentally deal with that kind of thing. I just don't know. But I'm lucky enough to be able to afford vehicles that have modern technologies like adaptive cruise control. If I couldn't, I wouldn't be doing this. I'd still live in Boston. There's no way I could deal with this commute. Before technology like this came out, I lived in Boston. I rode my motorcycle everywhere, or my bicycle. I didn't bother driving much of anywhere unless I had somebody with me or it was freezing cold out or whatever, because driving around Boston is just a horrible, horrible, horrible experience. All right, so I might just sort of conclude it at this point. I mean, honestly, so far, I can't say I'm regretting the purchase. And there was about half of me that expected to, honestly. The ride is perfectly smooth on the highway, better than my old JT was, with the worse steering box and a little more lift in 37s. It's pretty quiet in here. Can't say I complain about that. I'm pretty comfortable, getting decent mileage. I've got to hit the brake every now and then. Not the end of the world. As soon as traffic resumes, I hit the little resume button. Not the end of the world. Now, the Teslas and Rivian would just do it for me. That was really nice. I'm not gonna argue about that. But this actually gives you something to do. I would end up being really, really bored in traffic a lot of times because the car was doing everything for me. So this actually does give you a little something to do every now and then. Is that good or bad? I don't know. It's not a particularly enjoyable thing to do, but it's something to do. So I don't know. And the steering aspect, I don't mind not having auto steer. Again, gives you something to do. I don't know if I'll lift this thing or put on 37s, or, well, it's already lifted. It's lifted 2 inches, but if I'll lift it anymore and go with 37s, because I'm really enjoying how well it's handling right now and how well it's sort of staying centered where I tell it to. And I'm a little worried that if I go any bigger in lift or tire size, that will degrade that. Now, I think Gladiators kind of need 37s, honestly, to look really, really good. This looks pretty good on 35s, but I'm just another schmuck with 35s on his Gladiator, which annoys me a little bit, but I have to remember this is not my toy car. This is my utility vehicle. The last Gladiator I had, I bought as a toy with some utilitarian tendencies. I did that wrong. These cars are not, I'm not going to say that they're particularly fun to drive. I mean, they can be fun when you can take the top off, doors off, whatever. But they're not like super fun cars to drive. I wouldn't ever buy a new Wrangler for the same reasons I would buy an old Wrangler pre-2006. TJ, YJ, CJ, etc. were all, you buy them because they're really, really fun to drive. These aren't. I mean, they're just kind of nice, big SUVs that do SUV things or truck things, whatever. So my mindset is different with this one. This is now my commuter and long distance car. It is not my toy car. And I need it to function as a commuter / utilitarian / long distance, throw a motorcycle in the back car. And I think it's going to suit those needs perfectly well. As soon as I sort of remove that, it's got to be fun factor, and I'm not saying it isn't fun, period. It can be fun, but it's really, for me, it's my utility vehicle. My entire mentality changes on it, and I can look at it in the driveway and say to myself, it's suiting its requirements very well, and I think it will. And then on top of that, I mean, it's a Rubicon. I can wheel it, and I do wheel from time to time, not as much as I used to. I kind of got tired of the break it Saturday, fix it Sunday regime or regiment, whatever. So I don't wheel as much as I used to, but I do wheel, and this is as capable as they come. I mean, I've got sway bar disconnects, I've got front and rear lockers, and I've got like an off-road plus mode. I don't know what that crap is. I think it's like a tune for the traction control system. Maybe if you're ripping a little faster, instead of bothering with lockers, you kick on off-road mode plus, whatever. Kind of silly on the Rubicon because off-road mode plus in this is putting on your lockers and kicking some ass, whatever. But yeah, and then like styling wise, I think that this thing is a far better looking truck than the Rivian is. Now that's completely subjective, I know. Some people look at the Rivian and think that it's gorgeous. I looked at it and thought it's a truck. I got Laguna Blue, or sorry, not Laguna, whoops, Rivian Blue, which looks oddly like Laguna Blue with a little bit more metal flake in it. And it was a good looking truck. I wish I didn't bother paying for the extra $2,500 for the Rivian Blue and just got, I don't know, the dark gray or something. Now you have to pay for all of them anyway, so it kind of doesn't matter. But yeah, it's a fine looking truck. I think I liked the big light bar in the front of it. It was kind of cool. It set it aside from everything else that's on the road. But it was kind of a truck. Like I can't say I ever got out of it and looked back at it, which is really the yardstick for whether or not you can love a vehicle, as far as I'm concerned. And this thing, I know it's only been in my driveway a couple days really, but I've just peeked out the window and stared at it a few times. Which is pretty huge, honestly. And then so the outside is nice looking. I enjoy looking at the outside of it. I enjoyed looking at my JL, enjoyed looking at my other JT, which was that pumpkin color, which I'm really gonna miss. This is a Stormtrooper. Still looks good. I don't know. I might get it wrapped. We'll see what happens. But yeah, I mean, I really just enjoy the look of a big lifted Wrangler or Gladiator, whatever. I think they look fantastic. They also look pretty mean when you get the Rubicon with the louvered hood, or even the Mojave with the sort of slat in the middle. And I really like the interior on these things, honestly. I think it feels as high quality as it should in a sort of Wrangler or Gladiator. I know I keep referencing this as a Wrangler. In my mind, it's still a Wrangler, but the interior has come a long way from the JK and TJ era. Those were plastic. I mean, just plastic. Really cheaply built. This is all nice, soft touch. Looks good. Feels good. Feels quality. I don't see this stuff feeling shitty in 10 years, whereas old TJs and JKs, I mean, they feel terrible. Yeah, so I mean, so far I'm pretty pleased, honestly. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'll make a post down the road as to why I'm getting rid of my Jeep Gladiator for a Rivian. I don't know, but I don't know. I mean, this is working fine for me so far. I can take the roof off, which I love. There was no sunroof on the Rivian. I hated that. I'm sorry. I think the technical term is moonroof, actually, but I wanted one that opens. Whatever the one that opens is, the Rivian didn't have it. I hated that. And this also has a little back window for reducing buffeting when you've got either the windows open or the top off, whatever. I'm really going to like having the top off in summer. I'm going to buy the little best top flip back Mamma Jamma. And most of the time, this commute, if I do drive in, I end up riding my motorcycle in a lot in summer. But if I do drive in, I will absolutely be driving in with the top flip back. And almost every single time I drive this thing above 45 degrees, I'll have the top flip back. I really miss being able to do that, so that's going to be really nice. Yeah, so honestly, pretty happy with my Gladiator purchase. Sorry to let everybody down who's hoping for failure, but so far so good. So anyway, maybe I'll report back, maybe I won't. If you watched this whole rambling video and the previous one, thank you. I mean, I hope you enjoyed it. I'm not a YouTuber by profession. I just do this for fun. I do this for my records, basically. That's it. So if you enjoyed it, thank you. Feel free to ask me any questions, whatever. I try and reply to any questions or comments on my videos as quickly as I can. Because I got to nurture those 120 odd subscribers I've got. So yeah, thank you for watching. Feel free to ask me any questions if you got them. All right, thanks. Bye.